William, your videographer from Two Hats Publishing. Welcome to the College of Complexes, being held at Barbeck's Restaurant at 8949 Garland Road, Dallas, Texas. Gently embracing the east side of White Rock Lake. When I entered, I was greeted like coming home to Grandma's house, warm and friendly. When visiting the Barbeck's Restaurant, tell them you want your reservations for the next College of Complex class.
Testing 1, 2, it works. Ah, terrific. Welcome to the College of Complexes. This is our 217th meeting for those of you who might be interested. We started in February of 2009. Actually, this started in Chicago in 1951 for the purpose of solving all the world's problems. They're still working at it. We put a speaker on every week, a different subject. We require a speaker to take a position on an issue or express a point of view. They have to be for or against something, we don't care what it is. We give our, after our speaker is finished, we have questions and answers, not speeches. If anybody interrupts the speaker, remind the interrupter that we listen only one fool at a time. That's one of our rules. And we have another rule, that is, I forgot what it was. I'll think of it in a minute. Then we have question and answers, not speeches. And then we have remarks, rebuttals. Everyone in this audience that wants to gets 5 minutes at the podium to respond to what the speaker said for or against. We're starting a little late tonight. Our speaker got lost getting here. She's here now, which is good. So we're going to put her on. She's getting... Oh, I'll announce that. We'll get to that. Anyway, before I put the speaker on, though, we have announcements. Are there any announcements? Anybody have any announcements? Announcements? Ah, she has an announcement. I forgot your name. Shelley, that's, brain is dead.
I'm a member of the Women's Chorus of Dallas, and we have a concert at the on March 8th at the International Peace Chapel, which is over by the big old church over there. It's on Cedar Springs in Inwood. The Cathedral of Hope. It's right next door to Cathedral of Hope, okay? It's March 8th, 7 o'clock. You can get tickets on the chorus's website, twcd.org. And it's in celebration of International Peace Day. So that's what we'll be singing songs from wonderful women. International Women's Day, we'll be singing music from women and women poets. So International Peace Festival, March 8th, International Peace Chapel, the Women's Chorus of Dallas.org. Thank you.
Any other announcements? Now's the time. Oh.
Who knows exactly when that?
Come on up here.
I'll have to look at my calendar unless somebody else knows. It's something new, but it sounds like it's really growing in interest in International Women's Forum Day. It's on a Saturday in the next 2-3 weeks.
You mean an International Women's Day?
Something like that, or in honor of International Women's Day. And so where is it and when, do you know?
I just know we're doing a concert that day.
This is a daytime thing. Let me look in my book.
But there is a form.
We're getting great speakers.
Yeah.
There it is. Okay, she's got it. International
Come on
Women's
up here.
Day.
Come on up here.
Okay.
People can hear you.
Okay. In honor of, International Women's Day. They're calling it Texas Women Inspiring Change. Texas AFL-CIO President Becky Mueller. It's a 1:30 to 4 event, but if you want to volunteer, you'll be coming a little earlier, staying a little later. So they have a bunch of different speakers, and you know that gal Mia Yep? She's one of the organizers. Just don't even know where. Oh, this sounds familiar. 1405 North Washington Avenue, Suite 300. That sounds like the previous office for the Democratic headquarters. Is that right?
I'll just quickly add that it's at the CWA,
Yeah,
the Communication Workers of America. It's a small program we're putting on for International Women's Day. Jobs with Justice is heading this, so it'll be based on women's issues, labor issues in the workforce. Please feel free to join us if you have that day. You can get information from me on the Facebook. It's a Facebook invite, or I can give you the website again.
There you go. And it is, so that CWA is the 1405 North Washington Avenue. All right.
Oh, thanks.
Terrific. For what it's worth, one of the members of our, that used to come here all the time, Valerie Ann Kessner of Dallas, passed away on February 13th, 2004. And she's having on this Sunday, tomorrow or Sunday? Sunday, yeah. Memorial service will be held Sunday, February 28th at 3 p.m. at Sunday, February 23rd. Yeah, at 3 p.m. at the Preston Palace Building, room 185 at Preston Crest Church of Christ, 12700 Preston Road, Dallas. In lieu of flowers, please make donations of Valerie's honor to the SPCA of North Texas. Anyway, if you would, that's where it's at. So, what? I have this too if anybody's interested. Yeah, give it to Susan. It's got Valerie's picture on there. She used to come here. That's one announcement. Next week, we have, March 1st, we have two blues brothers from the Windy City. I don't know how windy it is, but anyway, they're Peter Perot and Tim Bulger from Chicago College of Complex. They're going to visit here, and they're going to brag about Second City. Frank Sinatra called it my kind of town. Peter and Tim will contend and outline why Chicago leads the nation in architecture, commercial invention, and intellectual debate as the first college of complex in America in 1951. So it ought to be interesting, be fun anyway, be different.
We're all bringing a snow shovel, under the snow shovel, we all pretend like and then look at them, and my earbuds, you go, what's that?
All right. You know why they call it the Windy City, don't you? It's not because of the wind, it's because of the hot air in the city council from back. That's why you call it the Windy City. But if they start bragging about wind. What's that? It probably is, yeah. Yeah. But there's more hot air in Chicago. Anyway, that's why they call it the Windy City, because So 2 weeks from now, restoring civility to our communities. No, not 2 weeks. 2 weeks from now, we don't have anybody. If you want to be a speaker, let me know. That's on March 8th. March 15th, we have restoring civility to our communities. Carol Donovan, she's been an attorney. She's going to talk about that. And you got it in your itinerary, which you all should have. If you don't, I have some more here. I hand them out. Anyway, any other announcements? Now's the time. Okay. You may not get to eat that, you know. Yeah.
I thought I was traveling light.
Well, anyway, you got all night to eat it. See, so we're going to put you on for an hour, and then afterwards you get question and answers. You'll be on for some more looking at that food, and then you can sit down and eat it. See. So it'll be a couple hours before you really get to eat. Just so you know.
Just so I know.
Yeah, and if anybody steals your food, you can throw something at them, you know. So, anyway, our speaker tonight is Collette Flanagan. She's sitting right here. She got lost on the way here, just so you know. And, well, she did get lost. She was on Highway 30 and made a couple wrong turns. And anyway, she finally found it. She's going to talk about how rampant and frequent she's going to talk about politics and culture and the district attorney in Dallas Police Department that breeds oppression. That's her title. And she's going to talk about how rampant and frequent is happening in the Dallas area, including statistics on many deaths of mothers, children in the hands of police officers, and open records on how certain zip codes are deemed hunting grounds for rogue policemen, whom the Dallas Police Department are prone to be excessive and killing. She also discussed how policemen who murder unarmed children are given impunity, the process of protection from the police department, the DA's office, how this works to circumvent justice to families. She'll explain how, I can't read my own writing here, she'll explain how MA is policy and, see, it's anyway, office police department that will save our children's lives and protect our families from rogue policemen. She will conclude why laws need to be changed in order to stop Dallas and other cities from becoming police states. So without further ado, please give a very, very warm welcome to Collette Flanagan. There you are. I can't even read it.
That's okay. Thank you, Tom. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me tonight. My name is Collette Flanagan, and I'm the founder of Mothers Against Police Brutality. Mothers Against Police Brutality was birthed from my own personal grief. My son, my only son, the only son I will ever have in this life, Clinton Allen, was murdered by a police officer last year on March 10th. Clinton was unarmed, and he was shot 7 times, and once in the back. Okay, thank you. And once in the back. Prior to this happening to our family, we had no idea of the type of police brutality that was happening in Dallas. I mean, those are sort of things that you hear on the news. You hear a police officer killed someone, and oh, how awful, or what was he doing? What was she doing? And it's how we've been conditioned. And when we found out that Clinton had been murdered, for us, it was like someone telling me that my 80-year-old mother had been shot by the police. Why would Clinton be killed by a police officer? You know, no kid is an angel, but he wasn't a devil, you know. He was a good kid. So what happened? What went wrong? How could Clinton Allen have been murdered by a policeman? So I made a pact with myself that I was going to grieve for this child for the rest of my life. But in this moment, I understood that I needed to fight for him. And so I made a deal with myself. I said, self, put your grief on the shelf, because it's going to always be there. But right now, you better fight. And when you need that grief, it'll be there. You can go back and take it off the shelf, and I do. And I look for my son every morning. And I don't know when I will ever stop looking for him. But in my grief, I managed to turn my grief into fuel, and I wanted to find out whether any other families that this was happening to, how could this have happened? How often does this happen? You know, I'm an ex-IBM executive, and I send my kids to private school, and I pay my taxes, and we live on a golf course. How in the world could this ever happen to our family? And so the thing that, for me, having a strategic mind, the first thing I wanted to know is I needed numbers. Nobody had numbers. Nobody had numbers. Everything was conjecture. You know, oh yeah, the Dallas Police Department, they kill people all the time, and I got so tired of hearing that. I wanted something that was concrete. So the first thing that we're trained to do is what? We call the police department, right? You call the police and you say, listen, can you give me any information? No. They're not talking to you. They're not dealing with you. You are on your own. And so the marketing machine in the Dallas Police Department starts to turn. And so they start, while they're not talking to the family, we were horrified to learn that they were releasing things about Clinton that weren't true. It was like a bad movie. You know, he was high on PCP and he did this, and we were like, well, Clinton Allen, I mean, that's a kind of common name. Maybe they got him mixed up with someone else. And so we called the police department and said, why are you saying that he was high on drugs? Are you doing drug testing on the scene? You know, where did that come from? I mean, why would you say that? Ma'am, we don't know. We don't have any, we can't control the media. So they actually said that to us. Ma'am, we don't know. We can't control the media. So we had 6 agonizing weeks of waiting for a toxicology report and autopsy. And guess what? Clinton was not high on PCP. So we called back. So can you please put a press release out and, you know, let people know? But you know, because I'm a mother, this is my son. You know, I put a lot of pride into this kid, and you know, and I just didn't like that. Man, we don't know where that came from. I mean, we just can't. We're sorry. In that moment, I knew that I was dealing with something that was much deeper, much bigger than even my son's death. So we started getting numbers through this process called open records that a lot of people don't even use. And as a citizen, you can require records because you pay policemen, civil servants. You pay for their salaries. So we got the open records, and we started working with a group that had actually started putting numbers together, DCOC, a very, very good group here in Dallas. They were very underground, very kind of quiet group, but they were doing some really, really good work. And they had started putting numbers together. And when I saw the numbers, I was like, this can't be right. How in the world could there have been over 60 unarmed men that have been killed by Dallas policemen in Dallas? And I thought I was pretty connected. And I haven't heard about this. I mean, what is happening that policemen are killing unarmed children? And then we got deeper, we started digging deeper, and then we found out that it was certain zip codes that they were killing in. So this stuff gets scarier. So we identified the zip codes, and sure enough, all of those 60 men, save maybe 3, were from like 6 zip codes. So we did demographics, and that was Clinton's mistake. He was in one of those zip codes that night. And so in the demographics of the zip codes, we now call them Dallas hunting grounds. You have your low income, low education, and a disenfranchised kind of group of community. And so what we found out is that when you have an officer that is prone to kill or have excessive force issues, they transfer them into these zip codes instead of getting rid of them. The policeman that murdered Clinton had 9 excessive force complaints. That's just the 9 that's on his record. We don't know about the other ones that never got reported. Attempted murder, and falsifying a police report. This guy should never have ever been a policeman. To this day, we've been very successful with keeping him off the streets. Our goal is that we would like to have him indicted, but we found out that that's a whole different horse of another color. Policemen do not get indicted in Dallas no matter what they do. We know that the district attorney's office can indict a ham sandwich if he wanted to. We know that. An officer has not been indicted in Dallas for shooting an unarmed man in 41 years. The last time an officer was indicted was in 1973. And some of you may remember Santos Rodriguez, a 12-year-old Hispanic boy that was handcuffed and his brains were blown out by Officer Darrell King. That was the absolute last time. So we found out through this walk that there were many other mothers on this path of despair. No answers. Mothers that have lost their children over a candy bar. We have a 15-year-old Bobby Walker that was killed by a policeman, 15 years old. We have Kendrick McDaniel that was walking into a Taco Bell and had rolled a cigarette and put it in his ear, and an off-duty officer asked him to come here. And you know, kids, they're teenagers, they'll pop off. That's not a reason to die or to be killed. And the policeman wrestled him to the ground and shot him. We have a group of mothers in this city that are broken, that have lost their children. Can you imagine losing your child to the very institution that you have taught them since they were little to respect? You know, your kids come home from school and you say, listen, Mommy will be there in about 45 minutes. If anyone knocks on the door and they won't go away, you do what? You call the police. Having the conversations, being a black mother, that I have to have with my son, that none of you probably ever will have to have with your son, is you are a black man, which means you cannot ride in the car with 3 of your friends. You just can't. You know, my son, I remember when he was 14 years old, having to have that talk with him, wanting to go to the park with some friends, and I said, listen, Clinton, you know, if you ever get stopped by the police, comply. I don't care what they do to you, you just lie down, you don't fight them, because these are the conversations that we have to have with our black and brown boys. It's a very uncomfortable conversation, but that's the way it is. And so, and going through this walk and finding other mothers that are just broken and can't even talk about it and have given up and thought that, well, who would not indict a policeman that shot my child 9 times? I have a mother whose son was shot 9 times and his hands were up, shot him through each one of his hands, and then walked up to him and shot him in the head. That was the last shot. And so this mother spent a year in bed. She couldn't get out of bed. I understand that type of grief, which is why, you know, when I first started this was about me. This was about, I want justice for my son. I taught my son to stand up for what was right, and I'm going to stand up for him. This was about me. This was I used to say, the Clinton Allen show. But although I'm not a religious person, I am a spiritual person. And when I understood and accepted that this was far bigger than just Clinton Allen, and that there were other mothers that were suffering and other mothers that needed a voice, and that we have children that are in graves. Clinton was getting ready to go back to college and studying criminal justice, and he left 2 twin boys, 14 years old. And so the rippling effect that comes from that, a lot of people don't understand, is when you take away the breadwinner from these families, what does the mother do? The rent still has to be paid, the lights, you still have to feed your children, and when your child or your husband or your son is shot by a Dallas policeman, they can shoot him 40 times and you will never be able to tap into the victim's fund. So who's bearing these children? Where does the money come from? It costs us $16,000 to bury my son. And most of these killings, if you understand where I'm coming from, most of these killings are happening in poor neighborhoods. Now, if you want to cremate your child, that's okay, but you should be able to have an option. And the order of having to bury your child, I cannot explain to you how unnatural that is. Nothing can prepare you for burying your child. Even if your child died from, an illness, and I've played this over and over in my head and said, well, maybe if he was in a car wreck, maybe if he had, died of, an illness. But I tell you, I'm a cancer survivor. I had just finished fighting cancer, having a double mastectomy, and I fought cancer with valor. And I remember the day, I was tired of being scared, and I decided, listen, I have 3 babies I gotta live for. So I told the doctor, what do we need to do? Let's get it on. And so in that moment, I decided, listen, I'm gonna be here for my children. My children still need me. They're young adults, but they still need me. So coming out of that fight and then having to go into this fight was the most debilitating thing I have ever experienced in my life. The other part of this is you hear about policemen getting impunity, and you don't want to believe that. You do. You want to believe, you want to believe that maybe a kid made a wrong move, or maybe because it's easier. You just don't want to believe that policemen that have authority over your children and your family can kill someone. But what we have to understand, what we must understand, is that they are human beings, and that some of them are ill, and some of them have seen things that you and I have never seen. But see, we're not against policemen, we are against police brutality. And so when a policeman show us who they really are by murdering our children egregiously, we must have the courage to stand and make sure that policies and procedures are in place to have this officer removed. We can no longer afford to embolden them to prey upon our children, because see, today it's my child, tomorrow it's your child or your grandchild or your nephew. And when you are part of a system that is giving that type of authority, and I'm sure if you think about it now, every time you turn the TV on, or if you get on Facebook, you hear about a story that a police officer did this to somebody, or they shot this person. Police brutality is rampant because when something with that much power goes unchecked, it's like bank robber. You keep robbing and you never get caught, you just keep robbing. So when these policemen show us who they are, and they're killing our children, and they do these egregious acts, and we're not talking about just officer shootings. I mean, we found that there are police murders. They're running over people with their cars, tasering them, killing them, choking out people, killing them, beating them to death. So to be silent and to not get involved and to not demand that policies and procedures are changed, because we're the one who have the power. Our votes are so valuable. So when we're dealing with a district attorney who gives a blind eye to this to keep his political alliances, we must ask for change. We must vote for a district attorney, and I'm not here to plug anybody and not unplug anybody, but it's just the plain truth when you know how it works. When you have a district attorney office that won't even go to the scene. I mean, all of you probably have watched Law and Order. I mean, you can look at that on TV. When there's a police shooting, who's on the scene? The DA's office and the police department. But our DA's office sits back and lets the police department investigate the very murder that one of their officers perpetrated, and then they hand them a file and say, here's the investigation. And then the DA's office puts together a report, and we found this one little secret weapon that they have that nobody knows about. So there's a little bitty guy that's been there for a long time named James Bagnall. He is the Chief Officer of Integrity, and he is responsible for putting together the most important report in this whole investigation. His job is to put together the report and present it to the grand jury. And so we wanted to find out, how is it possible, how is it even legally possible for not one officer to be indicted. I mean, and now we're at like about 68 plus unarmed men. You know, I'd love to have those odds in Vegas. I mean, that's like lining up 68 slot machines, and every time you put a quarter in, you hit the jackpot. It just isn't possible that 68 unarmed men can be shot and not one.
Over how many years?
From 2001 to present.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. We are number 2 in the nation. New Orleans is number 1 with police shootings. Dallas is number 2. We are number 2 in the nation with police shootings. And a lot of people don't know those numbers. And those are the numbers.
Of the kid, the teenager and down.
Well, I mean, not all of them are teenagers, but the most of them are like from 18 to 28, 27. We have a couple of 31-year-olds, like we have the 15-year-old that I told you about. So, you know, it's a variety of men that are being killed. So the thing that we found out with our son's case was when it went to the grand jury, we were there, and the grand jury is a very secretive process. Very secretive. We now know that the DA's office used the secretiveness of the grand jury to circumvent justice and to deliver impunity. And so on the day that our case went to the grand jury, but let me go back a little bit. Sorry, let me go back a little bit. To give you an example of how unchecked some of our political leaders are with this police brutality, we've been very vocal, one of the only groups that have been very vocal in Dallas with protesting and rallying and holding vigils and wanting to make people aware. We completely understand that protesting and holding rallies doesn't change anything, but what it does is we want people to be aware, you know, and the work that we do behind the scenes is the other work, but we want people to be aware. And so District Attorney Craig Watkins has an annual tailgate party thing that he gives on Martin Luther King Drive every year. And so we heard he was going to be out there, so we decided, well, since he won't talk to the family, you know, this is a district attorney who refused to talk to our family, by the way. We said, well, we'll just go out there, and we've always been very peaceful. And so we went out with our signs, and he did not like that. Now, this is a district attorney that's never spoken to our family, but he come out just blazing, you know, why are you ruining my party? Like, are you kidding me? I'm a mother, I lost my child. You're the district attorney, I want to talk to you, an elected official. You know, you're not a king, you're not royalty. We elected you for this position, and you refuse to talk to me. That's why we're out here. Why am I ruining your party? Are you serious? So you have all these signs out here talking about I don't indict policemen. I take that serious. You just don't understand. You don't, there's processes. Your case is not even ready to go to the grand jury. 4 days later, we were at the grand jury. Retaliation. Yeah, 4 days later, our case was at the grand jury. There were other young men that had been killed that had not even gone to the grand jury, but he fast-tracked us to the grand jury. You know, so like, let's just no-bill this case and maybe they'll stop protesting or whatever. And so when you use your office in that way, people must take note. So we went to the grand jury and we're sitting there, and they had, there were 2 witnesses that were very, very credible that saw the officer. One witness actually saw the officer shoot Clinton. Saw the fire, come out of the gun, and still have nightmares about it. And they subpoenaed her to come and then threatened her if she left, they would issue a warrant for her arrest. So she sat there all day, and the other witness, and they never called her. Never called her to talk to the grand jury. But what that is intimidation. So what the message in that is, listen, the next time you decide to get in police business, this is what's going to happen, and you go back and tell your friends. Basically, that's intimidation. So we're sitting there, and this about 3 hours. So finally, the door opens. Finally, the door opens, and out comes James Bagnall, the little guy who puts the report together for the grand jury, for the DA's office, who really works for the Dallas Police Department, comes out, and his crony, James Hallam, And to my surprise, to all of our surprise, 3 detectives. We were like, 3 detectives? We thought the grand jury was closed. You know, if you go in, you say something, they wouldn't let the family speak, but 3 detectives, and it dawned on us in that moment that there were 3 detectives in there pitching for this officer, fighting for this officer. And so they walked right past us, the DA's office, James Bagnall and the other guy, never acknowledged us, walked past us, went into the hallway where the officer that killed Clinton's attorney was, shook his hand, and the attorney said something to the nature, "Oh wow, you did a great job. I was going to bring that up, but you did such a great job." And in that moment, you know, we knew. It was no doubt at that point that this is all, if you ever thought that it was happening, we knew, we saw it in action, that families don't have a chance with the grand jury. So if your child is murdered, that is just the end of it. So what we want to do with Mothers Against Police Brutality is we want policies and procedures changed. We met with Chief Brown a couple of weeks ago. We want excessive force policies changed. They're unchecked and they're outdated. We want taser training. We want to know what all, because not all officers, we found out, even know how to use a taser. We want laws to protect our family. Listen, if you went to apply for a driver's position to drive a DART bus, you would have to take a drug test. Why aren't policemen drug tested?
Really? Oh, yeah, they are.
One time. When they first get on, no.
Wow.
They are not. Now, Arlington just started because they had a big steroid issue with the Arlington Police Department. But the only time a Dallas police officer is drug tested is when he gets the job.
When he gets what?
When he gets hired. And so we know that people are human and they have issues and there's different things that go on. And there are even, I believe, policemen that use drugs. There are normal people that use drugs. And so I think that it's just too much authority to not to be tested, you know, at least once or even twice a year. And if you are, if you have randomly, exactly, and if you have excessive force issues, you need to be tested more than maybe the next police officer. So those are the things that we are fighting for. We want to train 100 mothers in different cities. We are going national, Mothers Against Police Brutality. We've been working with other families, the Oscar Grant family. I don't know if you're familiar with them. That's the gentleman that was in the Fruitvale movie that was shot and killed. But we want policies and procedures changed. We want mothers to be trained to serve on the grand jury. And so when we get these mothers committed, we will be going to every district attorney's office in the cities that we get the mothers trained and say, hey, listen, we have mothers trained. We have mothers that are committed that want to serve on the grand jury when you have police shootings, and we want you to train them. So we have to inject ourselves into what's going on and not just sit idly by and just let policies and procedures that are not working and that are unchecked and that are costing us our children's lives. Anybody have any questions?
Why do you think this city fares far?
I'm sorry?
Why do you think Dallas fares far worse than other cities, including New Orleans?
I believe because the way that our system is set up here, the policies and procedures are really old and they've gone unchecked and no one has challenged them. And when you hunt in certain areas where people are disenfranchised and they don't necessarily have the educational knowledge to fight, so it just goes unchecked.
Is this black on black shootings?
No, 93% of the shootings are white officers shooting black and brown men. Unfortunately.
What does it take to be on the grand jury? You know.
All you have to do, if you're a registered voter, right? Do you want to tackle that? But
I'll let you get that, but I'm going to pass around this clipboard if you want to get on our mailing list or learn more about our actions and organizations to help train women. Please put your information here and we'll definitely add you to the list.
But to answer your question, it's more powerful if we go together as a group and say we have X amount of women. But as an individual, you can call the district attorney's office and say, I want to be trained to be on the grand jury. And there's a little packet that they sent out supposedly, and because they train these people. But what we suspect is, and we've have spoken to some people in private, that there is a grand jury and then there's a grand jury for policemen. And when there's police shooting, there are ex-policemen that are called, and we know that policemen will not indict policemen. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Where Dallas is a little different is that like the gentleman is saying, it's like pretty much everywhere, but where Dallas is different is that other cities are indicting police officers for killing. You know, when the evidence is there, you know, they are indicting. But what Dallas is doing, and we're hoping to change that, if a policeman kills, forensic goes out the window. They don't care. We're not looking at forensic. We don't care your eyes align unless they catch it on tape and they actually see it. That is the only time that they're forced to deal with it, like the Bobby Bennett shooting. The officer shot the disabled man that was in the wheelchair, and then Amy Wilburn that shot Kelvion Walker a couple of months ago, a teenager that had his hand. He lived to tell us. So we know that a lot of men have been executed that didn't live to tell, or there wasn't any video footage.
I don't know if you must have been doing, okay, I have a loud voice anyway. The whole area of what the media, the whole area of what the media, the TV stations, I mean, they're reporters, there's somebody at each of the networks, and then the secondary type of media and the newspapers. I mean, I guess you have a whole packet of information. You're constantly contacting them and getting them to maybe do some special stories or be there when there's a grand jury, or
well,
you're rolling your eyes, but I mean,
no, not at you, but
to, you know, so that the rest of the city can know what's going on, and they're in a tough position too. Not as bad as the insiders being on the grand jury or something. That's terrible, but
right.
And so, I mean, constantly getting them, maybe even to do some special stories as a follow-up, just like on a nationwide level, the national networks do.
And you're right on the money.
Maybe even pick up on something like this sometime.
You're right on the money, but let me tell you about the media here. They are desensitized. We've even had reporters that say, you know, we're so sorry for your loss, but, you know, to be honest with you, it's not newsworthy. Black men get killed all the time, brown men get killed all the time, and nobody really cares about that.
I need to ask you a question. Maybe I didn't hear you. What was going on? Where was your son at? What was he doing?
My son was in 75216. That's an old section of Oak Cliff. And he had gone over to a friend's house to retrieve a television. He used to stay there. And, you know, I'm a mom. I think they were trying to do a hookup too, because we looked at his phone later and we saw they had been texting each other and calling each other. It started like 3 days before. And from what we can put together was that he was supposed to meet her around 10. He didn't get there until 12, late like most guys. He didn't get there until 12. And he knocked on the door and he knocked on the door. And by the time Clinton got there, there was another guy already there. And the guy on the other side of the door was getting upset because Clinton was knocking and he was asking, well, why is he still knocking? He said, oh, well, he's just a friend. Well, if he's just a friend, why won't he go away? And I wish every day that Clinton had left, but he did not. And so this young lady calls the policeman to appease the gentleman on the other end, and her statement is she just wanted Clinton to leave so it wouldn't be anything between him and the guy, because the other guy was threatening to come out. By the time Clark Stoller, who is the policeman who murdered my son, he got on the scene at 12:26, and in 8 minutes Clinton was dead. 8 minutes. 8 minutes. And after he shot Clinton 7 times and once in the back, he handcuffed him. And the paramedics had to ask him, can you please take the handcuffs off so we can try and give him some type of medical attention. So in my spirit, I really think something is terribly wrong with this individual, and to know that they haven't put him back on the street, because that's the first thing they do. When he was no-billed, as soon as if they no-bill him on a Friday, they give him their gun, their badge, they're back on the street Monday. And this guy is still not on the street, and we will fight and continue to keep him off the street because he's dangerous.
Is he suspended or?
No, he has a desk job. Has a desk job. And had policies and procedures been in place, there's a union, you know, and after you let things go so far and you don't follow policies and procedures, they kind of get this automatic protection. And so had policies and procedures been in place that we're trying to get in place now, he probably would have had his job, even if he was no-bill. A lot of people think once an officer is no-bill, that's the end of it, but it isn't. It just means that he's no-bill and they're not going to hold him responsible. But, you know, there's still a fight. I mean, you want to keep that officer off the street. You want to make sure that he's not up for any promotions. And, you know, there's just, the fight continues, and that's what we have to do.
I got a question.
I'm sorry.
I don't know what the policy of your group is, but you said that you advise your children to be compliant and respectful, and I don't disagree with that. However, that would, if you tell them that, they might inadvertently waive their Fourth Amendment rights.
Absolutely, we know that now.
And so how do you coach them to walk that line?
Absolutely.
Because so many times I see young black men stopped on the side of the road and they're pulled over to the side and the cops going through their trunk.
Yes.
They must have given consent, and I'm sure it was inadvertent.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Because we as parents, you know, we thought in order to keep our children safe, the safest thing is to not fight, because they have the guns, and we know the history of, you know, little black and brown boys disappearing, being shot and killed. So until we got involved, you're absolutely right. You know, that's what we taught our children. And now we are teaching our children to ask questions, to ask them, you know, what are you stopping me for? Am I free to go, or are you detaining me? Can I search your vehicle? No, you cannot. You know, so we're educating our children, and that's so important, because a lot of children just want to stay alive. You know, that was our main thing, is to teach our children to stay alive, you know, for years. You know, I remember my mother telling my brothers that, you know, just stay alive. If you get home, you know, we can get through this. And so now we understand that, you know, even if they do everything right, they can still lose their life. So we have to educate our children.
Yes. Curtis made. Out of the 61 shootings since 2001, are there civil litigation going on? Is it possible to sue the officer? Are there groups of people helping the family members or next of kin take legislation? I mean, at least make the officers try to pay through the pocket. Hopefully the officers, rather than just... Yeah.
Yes.
From a civil standpoint.
Right.
And
Go ahead.
Second question. Are you working in close conjunction, say, with the NAACP or any other organizations help you? Could you kind of comment on that too?
Okay. The answer to your first question is we found out. Now you remember the hunting grounds, the zip codes. These are mostly poor families, and so when they go to get attorneys, there are not many attorneys that will even take on the Dallas Police Department. And so when they go to look for an attorney, a lot of them are turned away. And then some of them that we've come across have actually got attorneys, and the attorneys make a deal with the city to tell them that they don't have a case, and so then that goes away. And so you have a lot of families that are also taught, once the officer is no bill, that's the end of it. There's nothing else you can do. We have so many families that have been told that, and we think that's part of some of the reason why they make sure they no bill. It's so because it discourages families to file suit. So you have a lot of families out there that never even file suit because they were told, well, the officer, the grand jury didn't find him guilty, because the way it works for you and I, so they're told, oh, well, he was no bill. And we've met family after family that just walked away. That's changing though. The second part of your question is, this is very political, we found out. It's a very political fight, and a lot of organizations like the NAACP do not want to get involved. Now, we have support nationally, but our local NAACP or our local pastors here, they don't want to touch it.
Wow.
They don't want to touch it because a lot of the churches are 501c3, and they get kickbacks from the city, and they don't want to stop the grants from coming in. And a lot of them help elect the very people that are circumventing, like Craig Watkins. You have churches that basically put him in office and backed him, and they don't want to admit that was a wrong decision. They want to be proud that this is the first black district attorney. But my deal is, I don't care what color you are, if you cannot protect our children, then you are not the man for the job or the woman.
Exactly. The follow-up question, I noticed in reading some of your material, you were petitioning the Justice Department to do an investigation on this, and you mentioned New Orleans was number one. I know there are two New Orleans police officers on death row now that's been on death row for 2 years, Lynn Davis and Antoinette Franks, because of how bad they will be. Now they took over that. So my question is, what's any outcome or what's the prospect of getting the Justice Department to come down and put the whole department under federal review?
It's called a consent decree. When the Justice Department comes in and says, oh gosh, you guys are horrible, everything you've done, everything wrong, you're getting federal funding and you're circumventing justice, and your excessive force training is not in compliance, and so they issue a consent decree. Where we are with the Justice Department now is working with them and compiling. We want our case to be as strong as possible. So we don't want to just throw it up against the wall and hope it sticks. So we're almost completed. We're getting that last piece of information. We're having this goes into a question. We're having a public hearing at St. Luke's Church on March 27th, trying to get the date down, March 27th. And after that hearing, the public hearing is for all families and anybody that's ever experienced police brutality to come and tell us your story, because a lot of people haven't even been validated. People don't want to hear it. And so Chief Brown has been invited, and we're inviting other police chiefs, DART, those are the police chiefs that need to, DA, Craig Watkins, because whenever they have these type of forms, they control it, and you have to write your question down, and they pick the safest one. We're not doing that. We're having people that's going to speak, and we're going to have an open mic, and we want people to tell what, they need to listen and see how families have been affected. After that hearing, we should be ready to file our complaint.
Any other questions? guess you get to eat now.
Thank you guys so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Well, now it's your turn to talk. You get to respond to what the speaker said, for or against, or add whatever you want. So come on up here. You got 5 minutes.
I'll take 10. I want to tell you about an experience that I had last summer. It doesn't even pale in comparison to what happened to Collette, but around 2:30 in the afternoon I was driving, taking a lady to pick up her dog, and the dog was in DeSoto. Stop at a red light. I decided, well, turn right on red and go on our way. So I did. Got pulled over by a Dallas police officer. He said, the reason I pulled you over is because you failed to signal 90 feet prior to the red light. I said, well, officer, I made a decision to turn at the red light. After I came to a complete stop, you broke the law. Gave me a ticket. Well, let me back up. I was subjected to about probably 10 minutes of just insults and innuendos such as, what hotel are you and this woman going to have sex? Do you have any illegal drugs in your car? How long have you known her? Where did you meet her at? And every time I'd give an answer, he'd come up with some insult or rude remark, without cause. So don't think that I was in South Dallas, by the way, close to Redbird Mall. Don't think it can't happen to you, because I'll guarantee you, you drive around those neighborhoods, sooner or later you will get pulled over by a Dallas police officer. One more thing, I saw this in February of 2006. I was coming back from a road trip around 3 in the morning on Loop 12, going north on Loop 12, near Jefferson, between Jefferson and Keys Boulevard. I was going 75 miles an hour. Motorcycle passes me, no lights on. He must have been going 140. Cop right behind him, no lights on, no siren. The motorcycle exits on a service road. The cop, I saw the cop car hit that bike and knock that guy about 400 feet through the air. And then I saw him stop at the stop sign, turn his lights on, and turn right and go on his merry way. So don't think that the Dallas police... No, I was afraid to.
Anonymous leak.
Look, let me tell you, you call an anonymous leak in sometime and see what happens. Yeah. I've done it before. You can forget about doing it.
To the media.
Yeah, well, you should have been here last week. We talked about that, didn't we, Tom? About the media. They don't care. If it's not a newsworthy story, they're not going to report it. Plus, they're told a lot of times not to report certain things. I'm convinced of that. Anyway, I don't know what it is, but they want Dallas to look good, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, that was my experience with the Dallas Pig Department.
Okay, who's next? Oh, right.
In thinking about some, perhaps suggesting some solutions as to how to begin to turn the tide on this. Yeah, it's ironic. I was watching one of the old movies that's been out about several decades. It was Serpico. Yeah, about New York City, back in the 70s. Probably, if I don't know how bad. And like listen to the stories here. 61 unarmed citizens shot and killed since 2001. I'm sure most of you have seen that movie, but perhaps a good way to begin to turn the tide of this, you've got to have more Serpicos on the police department. I'd like to think, not everybody, there's some good apples out there, good, decent police officers who have some integrity and who don't like having their name and their badge and the difficult job they're doing made even worse, by some of the rogues. And that's one thing that's going to have to change within the ranks as well, appealing to more officers who have some integrity. And I know the kind of retaliation that they may be subject to, but appealing to those who have some integrity and are just doing the job and treating people fairly and doing the best job they can with as much fairness and equity as they can, whether it's traffic stops and ticketing. And I understand the caution that they have to be under. They don't know whenever they pull over a car that's tinted windows and things like that, that's going to be in there. And another thing that's complicating everything, Texas has the toughest death penalty in the state. There is no life imprisonment option for killing a police officer. I'm not suggesting any of that whatsoever, but that has to be going through everybody's mind right there, that people can be easily railroaded like that. You do anything to a police officer, whatever injury, and you're going to be spending some time, serious time in Huntsville. But my main point is, there's got to be a lot of police officers out there with some integrity who they will have to begin to stand up and begin to do something about this and demand change, demand the department have better screening and better vetting of police officers and getting on the street, from mental health to consistent drug testing programs, to begin to vet them possibly at the beginning to keep these rogues off the department, and hopefully slowly that'll get away. But we got to have more officers out there who know this stuff is going on. There are plenty of them who know this stuff is going on. They have to sleep at night as well, knowing this, and they must know this stuff is going on, and they'll have to start coming forward like this as well.
Absolutely. Well, wait a second. Well, okay. If the police officers who are currently police officers can't speak up, is there any way to reach the ones who are essentially newly retired? If there could be, is there an association of newly retired? There have to be some organizations of retired police officers, but maybe there could be a subgroup or a committee or something of recently retired ones who could kind of take this on, or at least be an ear and serve as a gap or something.
Maybe she could speak.
Make the communications be done to get things going, or
maybe
change the tide.
I'm sure there are there instances where officers come in and turn in their partners and other things like that.
Well,
where other police officers will. I know we're into that.
No, that's okay. The thing that we have to understand is in Dallas, the blue line, the blue shield has been so unchecked for so long, and the retaliation is probably pretty stiff. But since we started Mothers Against Police Brutality, we have had police officers stop us on the street and say, please keep doing what you're doing. We don't want to be associated with these type of policemen. No one in this city will stand up. Please don't stop doing what you're doing. We want you to know that there are policemen, more policemen are behind you than are against you. We have policemen from all over the United States. Our email is mothersagainstpolicebrutality@gmail.com. We get stuff all the time that has helped us tremendously about grand juries, about excessive force training, just things that we could never get, from the Dallas Police Department. That culture has to change. See, the culture that is there, it breeds this type of behavior. And so when you have that type of culture, you have to change the culture. And so that's from the leader, on down to the police officer. So it's a really big issue that has to change, like the leaders. It starts with the leaders. When you have a leader to say, listen, if you kill an unarmed man, we're bringing you in to be drug tested, and you're not getting your job back until we feel confident that you're clear. Just guidelines and policies and procedures, and that's what we don't have in Dallas right now. So that's part of why the culture is the way it is.
Are there any female retired officers? I don't know how long women officers are any of those involved with this?
Yeah. Hopefully in the future.
The shootings, men, all of them men, or any women involved?
Two.
2 women have been shot dead?
No, you mean
Yeah.
police
Women
officers? Yeah, 2
Oh,
officers.
2 officers.
Yeah, that we know.
And female officers were probably dead.
So just a bit ago, I passed out some flyers to you guys, and I encourage you to read them, look over them, take them home with you, pass them on to someone that you think might be as passionate about this issue as I know Ms. Collette is, and I am as well. It's important because this is at the very foundation of justice in this country, because we rely so heavily on our peace officers to provide safety for us. It should be beyond measure that one would cross that line of trust, because they are legally armed by us and paid for by, our tax dollars. So I want to say that I passed out some envelopes as well. If you're even able to give us $1, it sounds silly, but everything we print, every poster we make, every trip we take in our car, we are doing it by ourselves. And we know that there's so much support in the community, but these things aren't going to go away. There was another gentleman shot 2 days ago, and we want his family to know that we are not going to judge you. We are going to presume that your child was innocent, but until they are proven guilty, and we are going to demand justice for every child, regardless of their color or their class or their socioeconomic status. So please just take those with you and know that we're working to make the change in our own community, that I know each of us in this room, we've sat with each other often, that we all hope to see a more peaceful, more beautiful world. And I truly believe so passionately in this issue, because I think mothers, not that fathers aren't involved and not that other family members aren't involved. I myself am not a mother, but I know that mothers, the heart of a mother is so strong. And I think they might have the fight and the answer to resolving this issue. So I encourage anyone, if you can give $1, if you can give $5, $1 pays for 10 copies. $100 would pay for 5 color posters. You will see us out this coming Wednesday. We will have a rally in action. It will be at 4:30 to 6:30. We will be at Dealey Plaza, notably. And we will be asking for justice for people within our community. And just know that those posters, those signs, those banners, our buttons, that push for justice in our community will come from us. So we encourage you to support us. I also encourage you to visit our website. It's beautiful. And we take suggestions, mothersagainstpolicebrutality.com. There you will find our video links. You will find information, facts. You'll find some disturbing information there as well. You'll see the faces of some of the young men we've lost. Bobby Walker, 15, a large portion of them, because young people tend to be a little mouthy, right? All of us have been teenagers, and God forbid you happen to be a minority young male and you kind of get mouthy with the wrong, maybe police officer that's having a really bad day, and he decides, you know what? I'm going to execute you. And it just takes a few seconds of a bad decision. Maybe that officer didn't wake up that day thinking he was going to kill somebody, but he's armed, right? And I know I've had road rage in my car and thought, I'm really going to have to hold back. But we have to demand that the officers stand to an even higher level of accountability, because they are armed and they are given this huge responsibility of our safety. The public forum will be posted on the website as well. We'll have several events. Each month we will have one event, And that's just to keep this issue in the minds and in the consciousness of our community. So each month we'll have a rally or some sort of organized project so that we can keep each other informed on what's happening, and so we can also let our police officers know, the good ones, we're behind you, we're going to support you, and we're going to change this culture that's lasted for 40 years. And I invite each and every one of you to join us. Thank you.
Okay, this is quite radical, but the Mothers in Argentina March, the Mothers in Chile March, have you ever thought about marching in front, on the sidewalk of the house of the officer who killed your son?
Yes.
Wow. Well, I think the media would come and so forth. I would not rule that out. Okay, that's all.
Absolutely. I love that.
Thank you.
We love that. We actually protested at D.A. Watkins' house. But I love your suggestion, and we've played with that in our heads.
Stay on the sidewalk.
Right.
Well, I'm actually responding to Jim's comment about the motorcycle situation. In 1985, I was provoked by an officer into a high-speed chase. And he provoked me by putting his brights on at nearly 1 a.m. in the morning and approaching me on a two-lane highway at an outrageous rate of speed, which caused me to then speed up. I was going 55 in the spectrum. And he caused me to speed up because I couldn't pull over. I couldn't pull off the highway. And this ended up in a 130-mile-an-hour chase. He didn't catch me, but the next jurisdiction did. He did finally show his lights, but he caused it. If he'd shown his lights, I would have found a way to pull over. But I had no idea who was coming up on me that fast. And just coincidentally, I'd filed a assault with a deadly weapon charge on a very prominent person just a couple of weeks before. So for all I knew, that was an assassination attempt. Then later on, I would presume it was the same officer. This was maybe a couple of years later. I'm riding a motorcycle, and he and another officer in the car get up on my bumper and ride about a foot behind my bumper at 25 miles an hour through a 25-mile-an-hour zone for a block and a half. I was shaking. I was so angry. If something had happened, if they'd made contact with my bike, I would have taken off my helmet and I would have done my best to kill one of them, and would have been killed by the other one, I'm sure. Because I was so outraged that these people who are supposed to be protecting me were treating me like some kind of piece of garbage to hunt. And so I've lived through that. Coming back from Houston, I had just purchased a camera, one of these big camera cases, you know, the type you ship on airplanes, and I had it in the front seat of my pickup truck, which I had at that time. And there's hardly enough room for me, the driver. I mean, it's a nice big camera, you know, one of the big professional models. And I got pulled over for a burnt out tag light. And they wanted to search that case, and they tried everything they could. Two officers, these were DPS, they tried everything they could to intimidate me into allowing them to search. And at one point they had me out in the cold on the side of the highway out there in the grass. I mean, the last thing I wanted to do was have them pull that $35,000 camera out and be going through it out in the grass on the side of the road. I mean, the whole idea is ridiculous. And since, and this is all over a burnt out tail light. And so I'm there, I'm waiting, and then the officer is back in his cruiser, the main guy. Actually, there's another officer training him. It was really kind of strange. They train these techniques. So I'm standing here, and the officer yells at me, "Get your hand out of your pocket." My hands were in my pockets. That's right before they shoot you. I kept my hands right where they were, and I shouted back, so I would be heard on the police cam. My hands are not in my pocket. What are you trying to do? Now see, these I don't know where these techniques come from, but you know, I've seen the city where I was provoked into a high-speed motorcycle chase. That city over the next 5 years killed 3 motorcyclists, and there were lawsuits. One of them I knew about was for some young man, 15, 16 years old, who rolled a 4-way stop. And he died because they provoked him and then killed him in a chase. That's not right. There are other incidents that come to mind. One of them is I just got introduced to this gentleman down in Houston. I was at Quarter Price Books, and I'm a video journalist. In case y'all don't know, I got introduced to a very interesting gentleman, Roland Carnaby. Roland Carnaby was the president of the Retired Intelligence Workers Association, and I'd been introduced to him by a mutual friend. About 2 months later, I watched Roland Carnaby being executed on helicopter cam by Houston PD in what was reported as a slow-speed chase. I can't even find that helicopter footage on the internet. It used to be there. The only thing I can find now is footage of a purported high-speed chase. Carnaby, something went wrong in the traffic stop. I don't know what it was, but Carnaby was spooked, and he was on his cell phone trying to get in touch with someone. I think he called the governor. I mean, he had numbers for a number of different important people, and he was trying to get someone to call off the hounds. And so we had footage. At one point I had that footage. I don't know what happened, but I mean, you see him come out of his car. Now, they've already been shooting through the doors at him before he even came to a stop. I believe he was already hit once, but he's coming out. I could be wrong on that, but he's coming out of the car. He has his hands like so, and an officer comes over behind him and shoots him in the back through the organs, kidneys, I believe, and drops him right there. The helicopter footage, you could see that there were other officers in a ring there that he was facing. The officers actually, if you understand, field of fire. I mean, he's actually firing towards other officers and risking that bullet injuring someone else. So they really wanted that guy dead. I don't know what that was. I have a few other incidents, but I'm out of time.
Okay, who's next? We got John Beasley. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, 5 minutes. Well, I'm sorry for your loss. I grew up in a country where policemen didn't carry guns. You could go to the most roughest area of London. It was Hoxton, and I was a guard for the post office during Christmas. There was no violence. In fact, the BBC wouldn't even show violence. But I'm afraid, just like everything else, the media and the money has made more and more things violent. Now, one thing I would say is, in one of my books, of course, I have grave problems with the American Constitution. Britain doesn't have one. We've done very well without one. But if you're going to have one, the very first article should be a crime against democracy. So what you've experienced is a crime against democracy. Now, the fact of the matter is, this problem goes all the way up to our elected representatives, okay? They're basically, these days, corrupt from top to bottom. We don't have a democracy. So, the first law you must ever pass is a crime against democracy. Now, whenever they work for us, okay? That the first thing they must be told, anybody, whatever, or rat catcher, wherever it is, look, we pay your wages. You work for us.
That's not in law.
Immediately you think that you're our rulers, that's it. If you do anything to violate that trust, your punishment is 10 times what I would get for, a civil crime. 10 times. You put the fear of God into these people, and that's the first thing that must get passed in this country. So, I applaud what you're doing, carry on, but push for a crime against democracy, because that's what you've suffered.
Thank you so much.
Okay, who's next? Al. Five minutes.
I'll try hard. Most of these events that we hear about are kind of rogue events by individual policemen. When I was practicing law in Dallas in 1978, I got a guy out of jail on a heroin charge. And he was telling me, well, they planted it on me. And I was telling him, well, I've heard that before. And he said, yes, I know, but you'll see. And I did. I'll try to make this as short as possible. My case with him fell right into the middle of potentially exposing the fact that, if not all, a great portion of the Dallas Narcotics Division and the police department here in Dallas, not individual rogues, but a conspiracy in that division, without a doubt, was trying to muscle the mafia out of heroin trade in Dallas County and take it over for themselves. So my little case threatened to expose that. And I had all of my telephone lines tapped. I had my law office burgled for examining trial transcripts when on the stand this officer who testified to the facts lied and lied and lied, and I, being a young attorney, took it over to some other attorneys who were more experienced in criminal law, and they said, hell, just go to court with this. You got it won on this transcript alone. It's so obvious how much they're lying. I had, at that time, there were city, state, and federal investigations of the Dallas Narcotics Division going on simultaneously. And I had during that period, a state official approach me, and he said, Albert, I'm a parole officer. I'm involved in the investigation on the state level. And he said, because I have my job, I have the right to go down to the police department and go through records, and I hear things. They have hired someone to kill you because you won't back off of this case. And I eventually had that verified by a man who was in the intelligence division of the police department. And a friend worked for a mafia-owned nightclub down on Harry Hines, and he talked to his boss, and he said, hell, we know all about it, but those guys are so stupid, we're just backing off and letting them play their game because they're going to fall on their face. And nobody local would do that. They'd have to hire somebody from out of state. So that probably gave enough time so that eventually word from higher up in the police department came down and told them to drop it. It was a stupid idea. Now, I did not try to expose them. At that time, there were great tensions with the Dallas police in South Dallas because of the events you're talking about. A lot of brutality and a lot of hatred both ways, and police cars would go through there at night and get bullet holes through the windows and things like that. I'm not going to say I can't blame them, but you might know what I'm thinking. So this was a very tense period, and I did not choose to make all of that public, although every time I would pick up the phone and hear their recording devices come on and the dial tone change, I would say a few choice things to them and let them know that every detail of this case was in 7 different hands in Dallas. If anything happened to me, this was all going to hit the news. And I talked to the reporter of the Dallas Times-Herald. They were running articles. They had one headline that said $100,000 of heroin missing from police property room. I guess we know who got that. Only people who have access to it. And I talked with that reporter, and he said, we don't have any trouble in our editorial meetings in proving what we have found. The big problem is, how are we going to make the public believe it? We live on beliefs. We live in a little Alice in Wonderland society. We don't want to know these things because they're very disturbing and they keep you awake at night. I can verify that. I spent many nights awake reading late into the night to get tired enough to go to sleep. I had a prowler around my house for 2 years. I would hear him spring over my metal fence out in the yard. I never raked the leaves by my bedroom window because I could hear him walking in the crunch of the leaves. Well, 5 years or so after I got out of law practice, I had a call from a former client whose girlfriend's husband had been arrested and held, and they weren't giving her any information, so I said, have her call, a freebies thing. And I listened to her and I said, all right, take out a pencil and paper and I want you to write down these things. And I gave her a little list and I said, now I want you to go make an appointment with the officer in charge of your husband's case. Go down to the police department, sit across his desk, and you lay out these things. He's going to do one of three things. He's either going to see that your husband is turned loose with no charges, or he's going to formally file charges, or continue to hold him like he is without filing charges. In that event, you go hire so-and-so. Well, she had the moxie, and I appreciated this, to go make an appointment with the chief of police. And he was very polite, and he listened to her, and after she finished, he said, ma'am, I am personally going to look into your husband's case the minute that you leave here, and if what you say is correct, he will be out of here today. And he was out that afternoon with no charges. And then he said, now, would you mind, it sounds to me like you've been talking to an attorney, would you mind telling me his name? And so she gave him my name. And he said, oh yes, Mr. Holt, quote unquote, is a very fine attorney who's been retired from law practice for several years, living in a nice home out of North Dallas and running a manufacturing business over in Farmers Branch. Any advice he gives you will be good advice, and if he says hire so-and-so, it's a good recommendation. I had never in my life met that man, and he was not the police chief the last time I was practicing law. That worried me more almost than all the rest of it. Conspiracies are big in this world because there's greed and lust for power that controls everybody, almost without exception, who goes to the top of any organization where they can get richer and more powerful.
Yeah. Anybody else? Is there any more? Well, what?
Well, since we've gone, okay. Well, since we've gone conspiratorial here, I'll share some of the research some friends were doing in Houston. There was a Officer Alan Mabry. I think this was 1994 or before then. Officer Mabry was researching what had happened to the Houston PD's retirement fund. It seemed to be missing. And when he came across some interesting clues on where the money had gone, he ran out of milk for his daughter's breakfast cereal. He left home about 6 in the morning to go to the local convenience store, became very suicidal, shot himself twice in the back, and then swam about 100 yards upstream from where his body was found. And evidence on this and some other things was being compiled by a researcher I know, a very brave lady in Houston by the name of Froggy Simon. And Miss Simon got into a situation where a judge demanded that she present evidence. Now, if y'all understand, you can get into a catch-22 situation like this. If she had failed to go before the judge and present evidence, then she could have been charged with misprision of a felony because she had information on felonies. The thing of it is the DA at that time was the person she had evidence on. He'd been having, dipping into the a man by the name of Johnny Holmes, if anyone knows anything about. This is Houston. Johnny Holmes. And so she had to go in. She went in with all her documents. She presented her evidence before the judge, and Johnny Holmes the main suspect that the evidence has been presented against, she's standing several feet away from the guy who she's basically bringing up all this information on. He turns to the judge. He says, Your Honor, I see no cause to proceed. The judge says, so ruled. And everybody left. Now, we have situations like that going all the way up to Washington, D.C., where Eric Holder will not prosecute on cases that really the evidence is all there to prosecute. We're in really deep trouble, folks.
That's right. Anyone else? We're running out of speakers, finally? Looks like I'm the last man standing. You got anything to say? No? All right. I'm going to say something. I was the chairman for a labor union years ago, and one of the things that happened that could happen with this Dallas Police Department, I was intrigued by what you mentioned about drug testing. I was in the railroad industry, and we didn't have drug testing for years, and then they started accident incident testing, and then reasonable cause testing, and then finally random testing. And that's the one that really hooked in. But actually, if there was an accident incident, you got tested. If there was anything that happened, you got tested. And then finally, it was random testing. I was the chairman, the guy representing, I was the union. I was representing these people. So I try to keep them out of trouble. And I tell them, I had guys calling me up saying, well, what's this random testing? And I explained to them, I said, if you're using drugs, you're in trouble. I said, you better quit, or, get you a doctor or something. And so we took care of a lot of people. And that's the one thing that did it. And the company never knew. They went to the doctors, they got treated, they got straightened out, and it was a better system all around. But what happens is that if you put that in the police department or any place else, it'll start changing things. And it's a good thing that happened. It happened in the railroad industry. It straightened it out quite a bit. And you can't have people on drugs running trains. It's impossible. Anyway, and the union won't fight you either. They'll be for it if they know what they're doing. And I just thought I'd mention that to you, because they're for people, and you can clean up a lot of that. A lot of drugs causes a lot of problems, and so
A lot of people need help.
yeah, and so it works both ways. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that for what it's worth. And now our speaker gets to comment on a comment and close this meeting. You get the last word.
Oh, okay.
I guess in closing, the one thing that I want to leave you with is that it's very disturbing and it's very uncomfortable to have to admit that the very people that we've all been trained to trust have issues. We want to think that every policeman that took that oath to serve and protect will do just that. Because people are pretty much good people. People in general. Not everybody, but in general. But we have to understand that everybody that puts that uniform on doesn't deserve it. And everyone that puts that uniform on is not honest. There are always going to be officers that fall through the crack, that should have never been police officers, that should never be issued a gun, that have mental issues, that are just sadists. There are some even serial killers with uniforms on. We have to understand that there are even sick people that have uniforms on. And so when these people show us who they are, we can't pretend that they're not there, because our families and our children are in peril. And when you pretend that these people don't exist, it becomes an infested problem. And that's what we have in Dallas. We have a lot of good officers that do their job. We need to take a stand because this is our city. We pay their salary. We shouldn't be terrorized. And so to be silent is to be guilty. To be silent is to oppress the same people that are being oppressed. So when you understand and when you have the information that you have, get involved. Because today it's my son, tomorrow it's your son or your grandchildren. And so we have to think about, what type of city do we want to leave our children and our grandchildren? I don't know about you, but I've got two. The only thing left at Clinton are two twin boys, and I want them to be able to go to the store without getting a call that they were shot and killed because someone didn't like the way they looked with authority. So I challenge all of you to get involved, to know the facts and to accept them and get involved. You can make the difference. This is our city. Know who you are electing. Don't elect people because their names sound familiar, because your wife or your husband voted for him. You've been voting for him for 50. Know these candidates. Did you know that Craig Watkins have 6 judges running? That's dangerous. I don't know about you, but I don't want a district attorney's office and a district attorney where he can walk into a judge's chamber and say, hey, I heard you have so-and-so in here, give him 10 years. That's not a democracy. So understand that we have candidates that are running for judges that should not be judges and that are not qualified. They're merely put in place to empower Craig Watkins, and we can't let that happen. So I thank you for your time, and I appreciate your prayers. Thank you so much.
Okay, they kick us out of here they close this place at 9 o'clock, so we have to be out of here by then. And we generally go down to Starbucks down the corner. You're welcome down there. And we can kibitz with the speaker and so on, and that's how it works. But we have to be out of here by, we got a little time.
Okay.
We can, all right. You can kibitz or we have to be out of here by 9, so.
This is William, your videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below or like us or follow us and get notices of all our videos. We love it even when you call. So when visiting the Barbeck's restaurant, tell them you want your reservation to the next College of Complex class.